my game is on fire. This is a Q&A panel we do at a bunch of... it was a Q&A panel that we do at a bunch of cons that people have given us feedback that it's been super helpful to them as DMs because their games are on fire and they want to know how to put them out. This is your chance to ask professional DMs, hey, how do I put out those fires? And hopefully we answer in a really good way. Sometimes we answer in the just kick that person out. Oh, we need to scoot in. So sometimes it's how it goes. But I want you to now learn about who the professional DMs are that are up here talking to you. And we're going to go from there to there.
Hi, I'm Gabriel Perez. I am DMing with Goblins and Growlers and a writer. I also do the audio engineering for the podcast Quid Pro Roll. And I've been doing D&D since I was very, very small, like 7, 8-ish. My mom was my first DM, and since then I was definitely very, very hooked.
That's very sweet.
Wasn't Mom all of our first DMs when you really think about it?
You're diaper master. Hi, I'm Brandon. I'm one of the founders of Goblins and Growlers. I do a lot of the writing for it, along with Josh. And I've been playing D&D since like '95. I punished myself on 2nd edition for way too long, and then finally started playing 5e in like 2015, I think. But yeah.
Hi, my name is Alex Smith. I am co-owner of Alpha Comics and Games in Richmond, Virginia. I am also the dungeon master for the podcast Quid Pro Roll. Thank you. Thank you for that smattering of appreciation. All right then.
Show your enthusiasm in our download count.
I have been a dungeon master for about 15 years, and I have failed so many times in a way that I can hopefully give advice so that other people don't fail as bad as I have.
Just don't do what you did this one time.
My name is Alon. I'm one of the Goblins and Growlers. I am also on Quid Pro Roll. I do a bunch of community event things, and I head a lot of our nonprofit fundraising. So, as a DM and writer and occasional cat person.
Occasional?
My name is Josh. I am also one of the Goblins and Growlers, and I've been DMing for about 10 years now, somewhere in that realm.
Don't look at me.
It's been a while. Something that hasn't been mentioned yet is that thanks to community support from lovely people such as yourselves, we managed to raise something like $3,000 for charity this year.
Which
is awesome.
With Dungeons and Dragons. It's amazing.
It's wild, but so cool. Thank all of you so much.
Hi, I'm Eric Poach, and I just woke up. I host a show that we do here every year called Whose Rolls It Anyway? It's improv D&D in front of an audience and all that stuff. Yeah! Thank you.
No bees at this panel.
And also with you. But Alon was kind enough to come to my show last night, and we were been talking about doing more fundraising D&D stuff, and he asked me to come here, and now here I am. Hi.
He didn't say this, but Whose Roll Is It is also a podcast, and you can check that out. Where can I find that podcast if I wanted to find it?
You can find the Whose Rolls It Anyway podcast at thundergrunt.com, or just search Facebook, Whose Rolls It Anyway.
Yeah, we're going to make it a little louder so that the camera picks it up accurately. It's thundergrunt.com. Make sure. Yeah. Important. Okay.
Yeah. And also, to encourage everybody's continued attendance until the end of the panel, we have swag bags for as long as they last that we'll be giving out at the end that have a couple of original adventures and also our business cards.
There's also business cards, and also at the end of this, I know a few of us are going to be running pop-up D&D games. So if you're like, hey, I'd really like to play some sort of silly, wacky adventure with the jabronis who are up here, you can do that. So we'll be doing that afterwards. So let me give you a quick top level what this panel is. It is a Q&A panel. We can talk about all sorts of things. So if you have no questions, it actually kind of won't bother all of us. We're all DMs, so we can talk forever. We love the sound of our own voice, except for Alex. And
yeah, none of us like the sound of her voice.
And
so what was the feedback on your new gravy boat voice, by the way?
Everybody loves it.
Gravy Boat Barnes is a character in our podcast. He's an ex-professional wrestler. We should give context. So here's the deal. If you have an item and you have a question, please hold up that item. It makes it really easy for me to call on you. Not yet, but when I say it, if you can just put your hand up. I will call on hands. You don't have to have an item. It's just a little bit harder. So if you have a question and you would like professional DMs to answer it, a few of us will answer it. The great news about having such a variety of DMs up here is we're going to have some different answers for you. The great thing about that, there's no wrong way to DM. Listen to what we say, figure out what works for you, and hopefully apply it to your games to either put that fire out or start that fire in your players. With that, we're going to...
That's very Gravy Boat.
With that, we're going to jump into it. So if you have items and questions, please put them up in the air. And we're going to start with empty water bottle.
So this is basically my first campaign that I'm running for my group. Luckily, none of them are here. So we're playing Dungeon World, and as you know, it's not really a very mechanics-heavy system. They're already level 10, and I'm kind of at the point where I kind of have to give them epic levels, from multi-class or from other classes. They're basically ready for the end game, but they won't go to it. What do I do?
Okay. So we're going to repeat the question every time. They're ready. He's playing a specific role-playing system. His characters are at the point where they are ready to finish this game, and they're like, you know what? I know I'm level 60, and the level cap is 50, but I'm going to continue taunting these peasants for a while before I go fight the boss. My answer, and some people might have different ones, is bring the end game to them. However, put it on some treads or on a spaceship or however you want to do it and bring it to them.
So anyone seen the film, was it Stranger Than Fiction or whatever, where there's a scene where the main character isn't progressing the storyline, and the storyline then progresses through the character by destroying his home. That is definitely something that I recommend to a lot of DMs, where it's like, if you don't know where to take that next step, and your players, I love to start sessions with, what do you want to do? What do you want to do this session? But if the players don't know what to do, you just give them a little thing, and then blow that up so much that the entire session they are backpedaling and trying to catch up with what your plan is, because that will give them that change of pace, because they have a lot of agency, and then you take away that agency for a little bit, and you toss it back to them when they're fighting the big boss.
Okay, I like that.
Yes, we're going to do the Player Handbook 5th edition.
I had a player in my game that would consistently basically try to take other players' turns for them. Like, you need to do this. And then, no, you need that. You need to do that.
We all know that player.
Or I had to kill them off.
Yeah.
That's going to be my advice.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So, okay. Here's the question is, I had a player in my game who was taking other players' turns by telling them what they should do, and being the kind of overarching God spirit. And what do I do about that? The example given of what was done was I killed them off. Was that okay? And we're gonna, you have a chaotic game.
So words to live by as a DM. Never use an in-game solution for an out-of-game problem.
Yes.
The out-of-game problem is that your player is not respecting his other players and not just letting them play their character. Fixing that in-game really does nothing. It builds resentment, it makes people upset, tensions run high, and then your other players start to low-key become afraid of doing anything that might piss off the DM, because, they might kill my character if they don't like how I'm playing them. It's one of those things where you just have to take that person aside, have a sit down one-on-one and be like, look, my dude, you need to calm.
Yeah, stuff like this is really a management issue.
They need to leave the table.
So here's the thing, and this is the one that sometimes this is the answer to a lot of games. Your game might not be for him, and if my rule of thumb is, if that player if no matter what you're doing, if everyone at the table is having fun, or you established it in session 0 and everyone's having fun, awesome. As soon as someone's fun interrupts other people's fun, that's when it's a problem. If you have that talk with them multiple times and they're still doing it, they're not right for that game.
Yeah.
And
The other thing too is, and just to piggyback off of that, because just because he doesn't belong at your table doesn't mean he's a bad person or he's playing D&D wrong. There are many different play styles. Some people are really strategic. They treat it almost like Warhammer. Like they just want to. They're all about the crunch of combat. And then there are other peoples who are just much more role-playing based, and they don't care about that stuff. He just needs to find a table where like they're all telling each other how to play their characters.
You got it. No.
All right, let's go with
The turtle guy.
yeah. Let's go with
It's
the
a
Poke
Turtwig.
Turtle. The
Sorry.
Turtwig. Thank you.
Well, actually,
I just ran my first one shot with the dread system, and the big problem I seem to be having after some feedback is that there isn't like when they succeed a roll, it doesn't really feel like they're succeeding.
Okay.
Part of that is because I'm like trying like what if they didn't do it, they'd like die or have some kind of horrible thing happen to them. But it's still like it kind of feels like it's a loss when like their boat explodes and they don't like lose any life or anything.
I'm so excited to answer this. So the question is, I'm using the dread system, and then correct me if I'm wrong. The dread system being the Jenga tower where you're pulling the blocks out. So I have a lot of different solutions for you because we had the same problem. We've been doing this as a charity game for Halloween, where Gabe and I wrote a dread system based thing. One thing we learned is some people are really heckin' good at Jenga. Like,
yeah.
They're like, yeah, I'm gonna leap the cliff onto that cloud and jump off it onto the other side of the cliff. And you're like, that's 27 Jenga pulls. And you look down and they've already pulled the blocks out.
It got to the point where I had to be like, oh, you're crossing the street, pull 5 Jenga blocks. Because I just had to get some drama going.
So we have tons. We were trying to find tons of solutions for our future games. One of the things that Gabe's going to talk about is curse systems, which I really love. But what I'm going to talk about, I had this idea that we're going to be implementing next year. Don't tell anybody, or tell them. Let's instill the fear. Where some of those blocks are going to have curses on the block. So the number of blocks that you pull will also, even if you're really good at Jenga, increase the chance that you pull something really bad because you're being super confident. So just a quick one. Put that in there. Wait, Gabe, talk about some.
Yeah.
Some
Well,
things.
also something that I noticed that a lot of the DMs, because several of us, these DMs here, we all ran that same adventure, and everyone had a different solution to players that were either really good at it or players that were feeling detached from the actual system because of the tower. One of the things that I saw across the board, though, was that they just on the fly made it more and more complex and difficult as the game went on, which gave that sensation of like early on, oh, you want to do this simple thing? That's 2 pulls. But then later on, at near the end of the game, you're like, no, that's like 6 pulls to do that thing. And you're like, but why? It's like, because we're at the end of the adventure and you're supposed to die. Type of thing.
It's almost like it's your character's spoons for just being able
Exactly.
to do a thing in a day. They're like, I'm sorry, man, out of spoons.
I just can't do it.
Can't cross the street.
But one of the things that we created, because we're doing D&D and not Dread, I didn't want to just kill off characters right there, especially like, if you have someone who does you have a shaky table and the table just falls, the entire thing falls 5 minutes into the adventure, someone dies. That's not as much fun, especially in D&D. But the thing that we did to solve that, sort of, was we created a random table of viscerally awful curses that mechanically change something for that person, and it could be something small and minor or seems small and minor but becomes larger and larger as the game goes on. Like one of them was a person having a prophetic vision of someone else in the party betraying them later, and it instantly creates this like tension within the party, all the way up to things like the person falling flat on the ground and their soul breaking out of their body, and now their soul's walking around as their player, and they're trying to find out how to interact that way. I had a Kenku player whose legs ripped off and were replaced by tentacles. But just like those kinds of things, having those curses as when the tower falls, something bad happens. It can affect the entire party or it can affect that one person, but it is something that gives them that sense of building dread, especially when you get that first one off, because now everyone's like, oh, he rolled for it, so I don't know what could possibly happen next. But it still gives that sense of like dread, but not without killing.
Curse example.
Oh, you brought him?
Dread dramatically.
Curse of the egg. You feel a staggering pain in your your chest and begin to lose consciousness. Suddenly, your chest expands, breaking your armor and creating a perfect round shape as your skin becomes hard and white. After a few minutes of grotesque popping and internal ripping sounds, your body lies still. You feel warm, safe, like a child in the womb. After a few minutes, the shell-like body cracks, and hatching from it is a tiny, slimy humanoid that slowly grows into a slightly younger version of the person they crawled out of. They are now effectively a level 1 character. I just got more upset the longer I read it.
And that's the point. It's supposed to the whole dread system. I love horror, as this has probably come a couple more times. And dread and terror is that building sensation. So a lot of those are designed to be like that building sensation of like, oh, well, now you're a level 1 person. You can probably like come back from that. You'll probably age faster type of thing, back to normal. But still, mechanically, that player is terrified because they don't know they know that they're not as awesome as they were. They might get there, but it's a change.
Horns.
So when you have a game and you're having a fairly serious mood or horror, and one of your players cracks a joke, which you usually never want to stop because it's enjoyable time.
Yes.
How do you best reestablish mood?
I would love to jump in on this. Yes. So the question is, if you're having a serious moment or a horrifying moment in your campaign and one of your players cracks a joke, how do you kind of reestablish that mood? My personal favorite thing to do is, as often as physically possible, incorporate the joke into the thing that is actually happening. We had a situation where we were running a game, and it's like, all right, you're approaching a warehouse, and it's supposed to be kind of this situation where it's like, oh, there's guards everywhere, you need to sneak in, and somebody goes, a warehouse? Is that like a house that's only a house on a full moon? Yes, it is. And now it wants to eat you. Roll for initiative. Anything you can do to kind of bring, first and foremost, we had a rule at one of the earliest games I ever played that was don't give God ideas. And the reason for that was because players would frequently say things like, oh my God, I really hope it's not. And it's like, why did you say that? Now they know that we are terrified of this possibility, and that's exactly what's going to happen. And so do that as much as possible, because if you can turn the joke around on them, that's so much worse. It's so much worse than just reestablishing mood, because they're like, oh no, I did this to us.
Your humor is your demise.
Yeah. Another fun thing that like almost exactly with that, I had a player that kept making jokes on the name of a villain, which is, it happens a lot, because names are fun and to mess with them. And if you get to do it to someone who's not real, then no one's feelings actually get hurt, except the DMs. You hurt your DM's feelings. But excellent thing to do with that is have something in that world respond to their joke like the character said it, like that. And like I had a person who was making fun of the evil lich's name, and he was like, Dinkenstein, and then Dinkenstein shows up behind them, and it was like, I don't appreciate that very much. And they're like, oh, and it's like mini combat, then the lich disappears. But like just to bring that kind of thing, bring it into them.
And straight holla-backed girl, a lich.
Yes.
Yeah. And as with all things, like these are great ways to handle it, but at some point, like it might cross a line or just become like way too annoying. Josh and I are guilty of this, and I think Alex will back me up on this. He and I sit next to each other in our studio when we record the podcast and constantly draw pictures of butts to try to make each other laugh while we're recording. And it's a problem. And
we will be in a serious plot line about dragons and prophecy, and I turn around and it says butts and stuff, and has just this cartoonishly gigantic butt. And I can't get back into prophecy.
But if you have players that are behaving like that, have a conversation with them and ask them to politely get mature real quick.
How's that worked for me?
I mean, we self-regulate a lot of the time.
This is welcome to our therapy panel.
So how did that make you feel?
What do you do with a situation that's emergent, that's just breakout humor, just ridiculous? Specifically, level 1, level 5, we had a sorcerer with us who could not land a firebolt to save his own life. He
literally. Get a 90% failure on hit with a fireball.
That's awesome.
So the situations we got into because of this was hilarious, even though it wasn't meant to be. How would you respond to a situation?
So the question is, how do you handle situations where early players are, like level 1, level 5, are having problems doing very basic things like casting Firebolt, which should, in theory, be fairly easy. But this guy apparently had like a 90% fail rate. And so how do you deal with that situation?
Is that your question? Did we get that right? Yeah. Okay, perfect.
So in the podcast, I play a half-elf rogue. I have a +2 to charisma. And I am, in fact, proficient in performance. One of the first episodes, we're trying to build up hype for a wrestling show that we're going to be doing. And my character like busts in and it's like, yo, let's do wrestling. And I roll, and consistently throughout the campaign, I cannot roll performance to hype up crowds. My stats...
He has one job. He has one job.
My stats are right for it. My dice betray me 100% of the time. It's literally just become a running joke, which honestly we've kind of embraced because it's just, the more it goes on, the more it's like, you know what, maybe my character's just bad at talking to people. Like, maybe this guy with the firebolts, maybe his whole thing, find a good backstory reason for it, because DMs love that sort of thing. Yeah. And they will frequently award things like XP or magic items for such things. Find a good backstory reason for, like, you know what? The reason he can't cast Firebolt is because there was this one time when he was learning magic that he cast Firebolt and set his teacher on fire by accident.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, like, I have a guy who plays at one of my tables pretty regularly at one of our brewery games is a mage, and he's a really experienced player, but he always rolls badly. So what I ended up doing, just to make that situation more fun for everybody, is now, like, he just rolls on the wild magic table every time. So sometimes it works out to his benefit, most of the time it doesn't, but everybody has a good time with it.
You know who must have a good lean-in story for failure?
Is it me?
Yes.
Oh, God. Oh.
I've seen your table.
Or we're just talking about when someone just has the worst rolls on
just
Earth.
leaning in.
Well, little known secret, DMs don't like to share with a lot of people. If you're ever that player at the table who's just rolling bad, and you just can't seem to figure out why, the secret is that you're a bad person. And the dice know that you're a bad person. No, but honestly, there's just some people that I know, I don't know if it's something with the Earth's magnetic field, they just biff it constantly. I'm a huge fan of where appropriate. Like, sometimes it's nice to fail upward a little bit, you know. Oh, I cast a fireball. Oh, it misses. But you've set the wall behind the enemy on fire now. So, like, now that's a terrain thing that you can shove them into. Or, like, giving them something out of the madness. Yeah,
if they fail up. I know I was failing some, and Alex I was looking for a sword in the sand, and she let me find a dart gun. That was nice. On a 1, I really should have had my hand, like, sucked into the sand. So, hat.
This was just more like piggybacking off of that, too. It was another thing that, similar to the failing forward thing that could help, like, I know it always takes me out of it whenever I, like you said, you described a really cool thing and then it rolls bad. So,
yeah.
And then when you see the result, then you do what you actually do.
Yeah.
You don't give this amazing speech and then roll a 1. You go, we're going to try to persuade him.
Yeah, you can do it either way. I do like if you do an amazing speech and you roll a 1, then at the end of like the speech, like farting on the platform or something. Yeah. So it just negates everything you say. It really depends on preference. Yes, right here.
What do you do with someone who's playing an antisocial character who doesn't really want to participate with the rest of the group? And maybe the player wants to be part of there and enjoys it, but they don't like participating. Yeah. They're like a watcher that periodically comes in and messes with things.
My friend Joey's solution when we played the Star Wars RPG, he just played a Wookiee. He's like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to negotiate things. Like, Wookiee.
Oh, we're all looking directly at me for this then. So I am a big fan of helping your player find their reasons. One of the problems that players will sometimes have is this my guy thing, where it's like, well, my guy wouldn't do that, and my guy would never make this choice, and my guy wants to stab every elf he meets, and it's like, but you only have elves in your party, and he's like, my guy stabs every elf he meets.
It's what my character would do.
Ow.
It's what my character would do is fine, provided they're also okay with the consequences of their actions. And that's one of the things that you can actually do with players who have very, very antisocial or very quiet characters is, all right, you can do that, but it's going to start biting them after a while. Any group of people trying to do anything, if they don't have decent communication, especially if they're throwing fireballs at each other, or they need to stab, people around each other, and they're, finding themselves in peril to some degree of regularity, they're going to need to have some form of communication. They're going to have some form of bonding that they need to have, and that can actually work in your player's favor by being a developmental arc for their character, where their character is really like super antisocial, but now he's starting to warm up to them, and now they're starting to bond, and now there's a lot that they're starting to do, and you can pull that player aside and be like, hey, this is something that I've noticed. I know that it's frustrating you. This is what I was thinking that we could work towards together to be a developmental arc and to be part of the story. That way you can factor it in, and not only is the player getting the thing that they want, but it also will make sense for the story, which is something that for me is a very big deal.
Yeah, definitely pull them aside, have that one-on-one if it doesn't result in game. So stuff. Oh, did you have a?
Oh, I was just doing one-on-one.
Yes, unicorn in the back.
Right up there.
Yeah.
Part where Alon gets very intimate with you.
Yeah.
Sits in your lap, listens to your problems.
Puts his hat on backwards. Is like, hey, bud, let's run.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just answers their question for them.
Almost fumbled. The question is, I have and give me a thumbs up to make sure I translate it right. It was in a different language. The question was, if I have a player who's super enthusiastic, and I really appreciate that enthusiasm, but that enthusiasm bleeds into other people's turns and other people's spotlights, how do I get them to not lose that enthusiasm because they're a newer player, but also have them be a little bit staying in their lane and not bring over? Awesome.
This is going to be a recurring theme for a lot of these. Talk to your player.
Yeah.
Just gently pull them aside. It doesn't even have to be like a big thing. It just be like, hey man, I'm really super jazzed that you're here for this. I'm really happy. Your excitement's bleeding into me, but I do need you to just kind of rein it in on other people's turns because they need to be able to do what their character's going to do.
And I've had this happen several times with new players. I end up DMing a lot for people who either haven't played before or this is the first few times, and I try to, and maybe unfairly, give a little bit more focus to them during that particular adventure, just so they can feel like they're sort of getting their money's worth, and you dial it back as they sort of get more invested and more experienced and everything, so you kind of stop hand-holding them a little bit. But it's necessary sometimes to stop them from jumping in other places. Just make sure you give them just a little bit of dedicated time.
It can also be really helpful to have arcs planned in your campaign for individual character storylines. People really like to feel special and important, and if you've got plot that specifically rotates around each individual character, I'm not saying make everybody individually their own prophecy bearer, because that's a little crazy, but if you've got oh, you know what, I'm working on the next arc, I was thinking we go to this area, which you said was where your family was from. Are you cool with me using your family from your backstory as part of the campaign? And then it's a more them-centric arc, which then helps them feel that yay, I'm special, without needing necessarily to jump in on other people's turns.
And in a kind of sort of meta sense, the DM may not always be in the spotlight, but you're controlling it. You decide where it's pointed at any given time. So it's really important to just make sure you make absolutely clear whose turn it is. All right, Grognak might be the player who likes to step in on other things. What are you doing? Great. Thistly, It is now your like. Just be very firm. Like, what are you doing? Don't if you open up to like, what's anyone doing anywhere? Whatever you want to do, and it's usually whoever's loudest and whoever starts talking first that kind of gets the spotlight. But if you are deciding like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, just make sure you might just have to be a little firmer on where you're putting that spotlight at any given time.
Yeah. Round robin absolutely helps a lot.
Let's go with badge.
So I have a lot of trouble balancing encounters around both difficulty and variety. And I was wondering if you had advice regarding that. I do like that 5 and 5. I've done Shadow of the
Right. Sure. So the question is, he's been having a little bit of difficulty balancing difficulty and also variety in encounters and keeping things kind of interesting and fresh.
I too have this problem.
I do a lot of
solidarity.
I do a lot of the monster crafting for our games. My number one thing that I do to keep things kind of interesting is I will take information from the book, but I will not use the exact information from the book. So creatures that shouldn't have regeneration suddenly have regeneration. Creatures that shouldn't be out during the daylight are suddenly out during the daylight. And it can make for some really interesting situations where your party is like, oh, we've seen this before. This is no problem. Wait, kobolds don't breathe fire. What's happening?
Yeah, or like I legitimately will take stat blocks, and Brand's gonna have an even better answer, but I'll take stat blocks that are not for that creature and just reskin it as that creature. So they'll say, yeah, I'm coming up to a kobold, and I'm like, yeah, and it's mind flaying, you know?
I don't know what you thought my answer to this was going to be, but like generally my philosophy on this is just like sort of reading the table, and if it's not feeling like too much of a challenge, or if it's feeling like way too much of a challenge, the numbers don't matter. Don't let them get in the way of everybody having a good time. Scale down the AC, scale up the AC, scale down the HP, scale up the HP.
Scale up the damage.
Yes, way scale up the damage. But yeah, just do what feels right in your heart for them to have a good time. And that's all that matters.
Yeah. And CR is kind of like a playing field. It's not really like an exact, like, after a certain level, CR just fails you for anything, for any given creature.
Yeah, and you can just make things up, man. If you're like, because I say this because we as a group that makes money on our adventures don't use Wizards of the Coast property. We create our own monsters. Josh he's our monster crafter. He created a Rubik's Cube of gelatinous cubes, which you can find on our Patreon. Think of something insane and then be like, yeah, let's just confront
it was
people.
Cool. Like Josh spent like a week on that.
So cool. Cool.
The spell list for that cube is ridiculous.
Yeah. Awesome.
You're piggybacking?
Yeah.
Really quick.
How do you guys feel about fudging rules?
All the time.
I never do.
I am all about fudging
Alon
rules.
lives and dies by the dice. I don't care.
They'll kill me.
To me, it's like, this person's had a really bad run of luck, and if they continue to have this really bad run of luck, they might become disengaged. And it's sort of like finding a friction point with a clutch. You have to just sort of feel where they are. That's me at least. Like again, Alon would be like, "Sucks to be you."
What does Gabe say?
I actually kind of in between those two. There's two steps with those kinds of roles where it's like there's the role and how that would generally affect things, and then the effect, kind of like the failing up thing. So something that I find works very well is when you're rolling, determine exactly how that translates into the action you want it to come to. So it's like, oh, you failed, but it's a failure in this direction. You found the secret key, but it's stabbing you in the foot, type of thing. Or any number of things like that. But like if you as a DM want a specific outcome, and you're like, no, this actually needs to happen because it'll increase enjoyment or something like that, and you don't want to fudge your rolls, find a way to make that roll apply to that thing. Or if you really want to fudge your roll, fudge your roll. Yeah. By all means.
And
who doesn't love fudge?
In that vein, monster rolls, combat gets boring very quickly if your monster's only hitting itself. I said this on Thursday as well, but I have had encounters where I was rolling like 6 straight nat 1s for my creature. And it's like, yeah, this was supposed to be a big bad evil guy fight, but he just keeps stabbing himself. And the party at that point the party's like, I guess I hit him again. I kind of feel bad for the guy. Like,
poor dragon, poor thing.
If my dragon rolls 6 1s, then a larger dragon kills it. Now you're fighting that. Like, I don't fudge rolls, but just as Gabe said, I work in that space.
A powerful
between rolls.
spirit appears, manifests around the monster, and just is like, why are you hitting yourself?
Yeah.
Why are you hitting yourself?
Right here.
So I was working on a story that I've developed since into a homebrew campaign, and I'm going to be DMing for the first time, but I'm nervous because I've got a lot of experienced players, and one of my players is the DM for a campaign we're playing now. What's a way to get over some of those nerves?
So the question is, she's about to start her very first campaign with kind of a homebrew system. Welcome to the secret order of DMs.
Your cloak is in the mail.
And the question is, how do you deal with some of the nerves of playing with not only more experienced players, but with players that you have had as DMs previously? Does anyone want to jump in on this? Or am I-
Yeah. Like, how well do you know the folks that you're going to be playing with?
Not really well.
Okay. I mean, for me, because like I've only been DMing for a few years, really. I was a player for forever and a day, but like I just approached it when I first started because I was nervous too, and just had a conversation with them like, hey, I know you guys have a lot of experience. I don't. It's probably going to be some stumbling blocks along the way. If you all could just be patient with me and help me roll with it, that would be great. I might have some questions for you guys. Like, feel like you want to be able to let them know that you want to be able to lean on them for questions now and again. And it's not gonna. I can almost guarantee you, it's not gonna negatively affect their fun. They're probably going to enjoy it more because they know they're helping build you up.
Yeah, and it's super important to emphasize that if you need help, you will go to them for it. Mm-hmm. That they don't need, that way you get out, you don't have any of this weird, well, if you want to do what I would do, but that probably won't happen. Also, huge secret, whenever I'm a DM at someone else is DMing for me, I'm just so relieved to not be DMing for 5 seconds. Yep. They will not judge you. Yeah. They'll just sit there and go, oh yeah, I remember this.
Aside from my podcast, I have not been a player in a game for like 2 years, and like they'll be very thankful.
Yeah.
Kind of in that vein, if you find yourself stuck on something, knowing that you've got experienced players and a DM at your table, feel free to be like, so I know you guys are walking into this tavern, but I did not prepare for this. Mm-hmm. So let's hear some names, and I'm going to pick one. And just feel free to crowdsource a little bit of stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I still do that.
Crowdsource.
Because it also helps get, like, even setting aside this particular circumstance, it helps get players involved if you start doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Too. Especially if she's going to be playing for the campaign for a longer period of time, it'll help the same characters feel like they're building.
Mm-hmm.
If they have more involved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome. Hand in the aisle. Yes.
Are there any resources or videos or anything like that you recommend?
There's so many.
Oh, repeat the question.
Yeah. The question is, are there any websites, books, materials that we can recommend for a first-time DM? Two of my big ones. First one's slightly controversial depending on who you talk to. The Angry GM is a blog online. Fantastic D&D advice, but the thing is, it's all in a very angry nerd persona. If you can get past that, the advice is solid gold. When I first started doing it, stepped my game up so much. There's also an incredible book that I just got called "The Monsters Know What They're Doing," which is a compendium of it just using pure stats from the D&D 5e handbook. The guy writes out these dissertations on each monster, how those stats will dictate what it does in combat. Because he's like, the monsters are intelligent, they want to win, here's what they would do to get it. It's really, really good.
In that vein, there is a group, Sly Flourish. They do what's called the Lazy DM's Guide. That is killer. It's really helpful because your first instinct as a DM, or at least mine when I was first starting out, is typically to over-prepare and then feel like you can't use the work because, they're not going to that region yet. Lazy DM's Guide is really good at giving you some notes on how to make things kind of loose and flowy because your characters are not going to do exactly what you want them to do. But then also to help feel things that are locked in.
We're going to speed up because we have a lot more questions we're going to get to, but really quickly, there are actually groups being built out there as well, and you guys can collaborate to them. There's collaborative spaces where people are becoming better DMs. One of them is at Alpha Comics and Games, so I'm going to prep that real quick. Alex runs DMMD, Dungeon Masters Mastering Dungeons. And Gabe, but it's at Alex's space. Gabe doesn't own the space, Alex owns the space, and then Gabe owns the space. DMMD is, and that's a collaborative. If you're in Richmond area, you can join that. I think we're gonna hopefully be having a podcast on that soon. So definitely check out Goblins and Growlers and our Patreon, et cetera, et cetera. But we're gonna start rapid firing some questions. We're gonna start in the back left. Yes.
Yeah. So I tend to play kind of fast and loose with the rules because I find it more fun to be flexible, and most of my players agree. And in the past, we've had a lot of scoring for rules lawyers, and as we've matured, I at least have realized that is less a consequence of being stiffer like that, and it's more frequently a result of neurotype differences. And I've got friends who want to play, and they play in patterns, and they're very, they like rules. Right. Not only do they not think about rules the way that we do as, oh gosh, this is fun, but they do not know the game and then here's the rules. And I would really like to find ways to mesh my preferred DMing and
Right. Yeah. Give me the thumbs up, thumbs down if I get your question right. Here's the question. I have two different types of players, some that are rules lawyers and much need that structure because that's how they're programmed, that's how they have fun, and people who really want to play it loose with the rules, and that's how they have fun. How do I mesh those two? Is that your question, roughly? Yes, awesome.
Actually, one of the pieces of advice that I would give to that is my advice for almost every campaign is have a session 0 where you sit down with your players and have a conversation on what they want out of the game, what their expectations are from the game, the kind of game that you enjoy playing and that you want to run, what their character's going to be, all that good stuff. And one of the things that you all can do is come to a mutual table discussion and agreement on what the good middle ground will be. A lot of time, when you're not neurotypical and you do focus really, really heavily on rules and on structure, if there is another structure that you can use, then it will work a little bit better. So if you're like, hey, I tend to fudge the rules, I change the rules on this, but this is what I use to do so. Here is what you can use to expect the change and how you can sort of anticipate what my change will be. That's usually very, very helpful and can be a good happy medium between the players who are like, I hate accounting for weight and I never want to do it at any point ever. But you have somebody who, really wants to calculate that stuff and really wants to measure it. Give everybody bags of holding. That is a very good way to get around that.
That's also a bad way to get around that.
But that is a really good way to do it. Because normally DMs don't just pull things out of their butts when it comes to how they make decisions.
They pull it out of the bag of holding.
Yeah. We pull everything else out of our butts, but when it comes to how we make decisions, there's usually a pretty solid structure for why we will choose what we choose. If you can mark that out and explain that and have that be a conversation, generally that is going to be a good happy medium between your players who are like, psh, wild magic table is how I cast all my spells, and no, you don't understand, I really want to calculate my weight.
A quick note, Alex mentioned session 0s. For those of you who may not be familiar with session 0, it is the get together before you get together to play D&D. You basically want to sit everybody down and set your expectations for, this is the world I want to play in, these are the kinds of races that I would be happy with you all being, and then you can have that discussion about what does this game look like for the DM, and then what does this game look like for the players, so that everyone has a good understanding of where they stand before you actually start. This is also a great time if you're the kind of person who likes to write a big story about the world as it is now. This is the time to do that, because if you say, let's everybody get together and play some D&D and roll some dice, and then you spend the first 30 minutes telling them about the world has changed. I can feel it in the water. They're like, when do we kill things?
Microwaves no longer work. Yeah. Other questions? Yes, right here.
Yes, right here.
So I was DMing my first session with my friends, and they would take forever to make choices.
Yeah.
So they were in a hallway, and there were enemies in a room, and they spent, I kid you not, 15 minutes deciding whether or not to sneak around the room.
Yeah. rapid fire answers, but I know you have a really good one.
So, real quick, the question,
question.
guys, the question is, I was running my first session and players were taking forever to make decisions. How do you deal with that, right? Yes. No.
Light a fire under their ass. Give them something. The room is filling with water. Something is chasing them. Something is getting away with something very precious. It's important for players to have a ticking clock that they can see so they know that like time is precious, and you have to emphasize like you have to act now or they're getting away. You have to act now or you're going to drown. You have to act now, I'm going to throw a dice at your head. But like just urgency is important. It doesn't mean they always have to be like an episode of 24 where they're running around kicking doors down like but they do need a very compelling reason, because if there's no reason for them to not take their time, they'll do it every time. Like, why wouldn't they? You just need to give something that's driving them to, we need to make a choice right now.
Right.
In the vein of realism, when you've got monsters in a room and the players are just standing, the characters are just standing outside the room discussing what's going to happen, like one of those monsters gets up to have a pee break and it's like, oh God, there's adventurers in the hallway.
Yeah, my solution is kind of meta, but I just like hold up my hand and just do like this. And then they very quickly understand something is happening.
As long as they can see the clock.
Yeah.
I brought this up in the last panel.
Yeah, right.
And just wanted to ask. So I have a lot of vague ideas for things that I want to do as a DM.
Yeah.
But I don't really have anything to like correlate them into like a big narrative, kind of just things to do and things that I want to see happen, but not necessarily the like threads in between.
Actually, Gabe would be great. And Gabe, restate that question.
Give me a thumbs up if I get this right. Your question was, you have a lot of ideas, a lot of pieces of things that you like and you want to touch on, but you haven't quite like tied them into the narrative that you want for the players to experience, like in a sequence or in any way like that. No narrative at all.
Wants to make it happen.
You want to make the narrative happen.
Necessarily, like, there's no real
Well,
thing that
one of the things that I like to do in that realm, because I do the same thing where I'm like, here's an idea, and I will just write it down, and then I will go back to my ideas book when I'm writing something, and I'm like, well, that's a horrible idea. When did I write that? I'm putting this right in the beginning of the adventure. And that kind of thing, you can have episodic adventures. You can have something that is like, in this adventure, you just give them a whole lot of, exposition?
Yeah.
Like, you're here, you're in the Goblin Temple, and you're fighting this because you need to get this thing back.
Yeah.
Set them up, exposition, it's excellent for one-shots. If you're doing one-shot, lots of exposition.
Think
it gets
90s
you started.
cartoons. Cowboy Bebop, you're a space cowboy, but now you're actually in the desert tripping. Like you can tie in whatever you want to do, just make it episodic.
Yeah, like the way we structure some of our games, like the games we run every other Tuesday are all one-shots, but there's the thinnest of narrative threads tying them together. That's basically like, you all are based out of this town and you're getting sent on missions.
Yeah.
And then eventually, all that'll sort of steep in your head and you'll probably be able to come up with something that'll tie it all together.
Yes, right here. Yes.
Yes.
I know I should say the thing, but it was so holographic it blinded me.
So I tend to improv DM a lot. I write down a bunch of like notes and ideas or things that I see that I kind of put around. My players seem to be having a lot of fun with it, but I always worry that I'm going to just hit a brick wall with my improv. How do I like make some sort of structure enticing for myself so that I'm looking at
We're handing it to me. So your question, again, thumbs up, thumbs down. I improv a ton as I DM, and I also do. So we both improv a ton when we DM, but we're afraid that we might hit a wall. The players love what they're doing right now, but that's something that I'm worried about because I haven't prepped enough or haven't prepped much. And we have a professional improver here. So
The most important thing to remember is improv does not mean not prepared. Always have, like, I'll just have a stack next to me of monster sheets and random encounters. And actually what I'll do is, like, when I have all those disjointed things that I want to have happen in my game, I'm like, I don't know what this is going to be, but it's happening one day. And I just put it in a pile. And when I run out of improv juice and I'm just, like, drawing blanks, I pull all that stuff out. I just go with all that random stuff. And because I have it at the ready if I need it. And that actually puts me in a really good comfort zone so I don't have to panic about that as much, which makes it so I can just keep on it making stuff up.
next questions. Yes, Coke bottle. I'm from Atlanta, so this is legal. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. How do I storytell when all my players are really passive people? Awesome.
There's a couple of things you can do. Thing number one is give them enough time and understanding of what's going on around them that they feel like they've got some narrative control to begin with. The other thing that you can do is you can have discussions with them individually and be like, what are you really interested in getting out of this campaign? Ideally, you're having those sorts of conversations at a session 0, like we talked about earlier. But if you're already in progress, then basically have session 0 now. Go talk to them, be like, what does your character really want to accomplish in the world? And then start building things that are kind of in that vein, because that will give them the feeling of narrative control, which will then make them more comfortable with doing things like making decisions and helping create the world. You can do a little bit of setting up those, I need a name for this tavern, and then being like, who's got a name for me? Come on. Inspiration for a name. Let's do this.
You can also, and everybody put stuff out, you can also just touch base after every game. Like, that's totally cool, and see what people want to do. Yes, badge in the back. Yes. Is it not a badge? I can't.
Is that bread?
I think that's a little.
That's bread. Yeah. No, that's a badge. Wait, is there staff here? That's a valid badge, right? Okay, perfect. Good. Yes.
But it ends up sometimes leading to like 15-minute conversations on the physics of grapple hooks, and it just is really I don't want to stifle it, but I also don't like that question.
Yeah, restate it for me.
Yeah. So, and give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Your players want to do crazy grapples and things like that. You don't want to stifle that creativity, but every now and again it becomes this big process of discussing how it actually even is remotely possible, or physics, or anything like that. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, like, it's a fantasy game, but there has to be sort of realism up to a certain point. And for me, that's kind of, I don't want to say a non-starter, it's a difficult starter. So, I mean, having a discussion about like, yeah, okay, so the basics of physics in this universe are this. But that being said, Josh and I one time got into this situation where we ended up accidentally inventing a snake gun that fired snakes. And
real quick, it was a snake trap, and the players pulled it out of the wall, and then the druid would turn themselves into a snake, and they would shoot the druid.
Yeah, somebody summoned a bucket of snakes too. But anyway, so one of my players, who is really an outside the box kind of person, is like, well, could we use it to fire a grapple gun? Like, I was like, you mean like Batman but with a snake? And he's like, yeah. And we very quickly were just like, okay, the snake's gonna have to have some kind of enchantment, and it's going to like, so it doesn't break in half when it latches onto something.
So shooting dead snakes at us.
So like, I guess what I'm getting at, if the grapple thing is like a consistent thing you've got going on in this game with these people, just be like, all right, guys, before we get started today, let's have a quick physics lesson and decide on how this works in this universe. And then you have a common set of facts that you can work from there.
For your own sanity, be perfectly willing to be like, we're doing it this way. I don't care if you all want to make a case for something different later, that's fine. But right now, this is what we're doing and this is how it's going to happen. And they're like, but that doesn't make sense. And you're like, neither do wizards.
Yeah. And honestly, I was not all about the snake grapple until it was pitched to me. And I'm like, yeah, I can't really say no to that.
Every DM has different comfort levels. So, find the space where everybody's having fun. It's all about trying to make sure everybody has fun. Water bottle with the blue top, then we'll do water bottle that's darker and spooky. Whoa!
It can be done.
They're not ready for the campaign. They don't even playing these characters. It's like a great problem to have.
Right.
It's a problem.
Repeat the question.
Yeah. I was about to. I got it. So thumbs up, thumbs down on this. So what you're saying is you are ready. You're at a point where you've been running the campaign for a long time. They're pretty much maxed out. You're ready to end the story and move on to the next story. But they're like, no, this is home. Is that about where we're at? All right, cool. generally, the reason that they care so much is they care deeply about their characters and the things that they've created in the world. You can always try, as you move on to other stories, to incorporate elements of that. Like, say the characters that they run up in the next game are descendants of their current characters. Say that they are distantly related. Say that they're reincarnations and go all Inuyasha with it. Like, take something that will continue what you guys have built together and move it to the next thing. And that might be a much better way to get your players to be more comfortable with the idea of starting up a new story.
Or just say, please, if that doesn't work. And they need a DM more than you need them. So
supply and demand.
Yeah. Did you have a?
And there's a reason I actually enjoy that Firefly only had one season. Because I was much happier to see it end when everyone was loving it and it was so good than have to be forced to watch it slowly die. So sometimes you always want to end when they're at just like, I could do this forever. And that's when we come to a close. That we will always think fondly on it and never have to tell stories about like, yeah, that campaign was so good, but then it just kind of...
Mm-hmm. The slightly, like the gray water bottle, yes, perfect. Are.
And they, one of the reasons I wanted to do that is I wanted them to be able to bring their like home base with that. But that now also means that they can just go long rest whenever they want and get all their home things. They have this nice station. And I want to make it more dangerous.
Pirate-themed campaign. The problem with that is that, we started with you can bring your ship with you, which made it easy. Now it's a problem. They have their ship with them all the time, and they're long resting whenever they want. What do? Go, Josh is so excited.
Yes.
So they have a thing that they love and are very excited about. Endanger it.
If there are other pirates, perhaps they are in need of a second ship.
Fire is bad on wooden ships.
Crews cost money.
Ships falling out of the sky sometimes hit other ships.
Also, another...
Why would you get an airship?
Oh my God. Just jump in. Another thing that you can do with that is a lot of those like pirate kind of seafaring adventures have moments where like, all right, now we have landed, we've made port somewhere, and we have to go do something there. And you can have that be a thing that like they go there and something there changes. So you don't necessarily like, oh, your ship exploded, haha. But it could certainly be something like you go there and oops, you fell through a time loop. Now you're 10 years before you docked your ship at this place, or after, and someone else sailed your ship away. Now you got to go find it again. That type of thing.
Shit you not, that literally happened in my campaign 2 weeks ago.
Shipless not.
Ship exploded, time warps.
Yeah. See, yeah.
You can also, from a realism standpoint, not everything is less than a day's travel from the shore. So they may have to go way inland for something for a few weeks.
Desert adventure.
Pirates in the desert.
Yeah, or just the ocean dries up, you know? It happens, apparently, in this world that you've created, and you can do anything you want. Hopefully that's enough ideas for you to do something crazy.
We had one over here we haven't gotten to.
Question over here somewhere.
I think you had a Nintendo Switch thing.
Such as dice fudging, forgetting your character sheet, making up stats.
Right.
To confront people about?
Right. We're going to have quick rapid-fire answers from everybody, a few words, and we're going to start with me, and then we'll go for Gabe. The question is, I have friends. They have some things like they fudge stats, or they change their sheets, or something like that. How do I confront people on that?
Definitely. My big thing with that is I do D&D for kids sometimes, and sometimes that kind of thing will happen. Adults or kids too, just saying. But it really is like when it's happening, sometimes calling them out, you know, if the table's okay with that, calling them out's okay. But for the most part, in between sessions, having that conversation of like, hey, I noticed. I am all-seeing. And I want you to have fun, but I want us all to have fun together. And it panics me when someone is like, I rolled a 20. You're like, yeah. So it is about the DM's fun, and if it stresses you, you're not having fun.
That might be all the answers, actually.
Yeah. I mean, and as far as the dice thing, have them roll out in the open, unless you're playing over like Roll20 or something like that.
I mean,
you know.
For stats, you can also session 0 be like, we're doing standard array or we're doing point buy, and that's it.
Yeah.
Because then when somebody's like, no, I've got a 20, it's like, no, you definitely do not. Something went wrong in your math. Let's take a look at your system and see where we went awry.
4d6 drop the lowest is how God intended characters to be created.
Get out of here. Again, this is another example of lots of different ways to DM. None of them are wrong. However you want to confront that, the big thing is just if it's interrupting your fun, take them aside and have that conversation. Say it's interrupting my fun. You need me more than I need you. More questions. Where we at? Are we over time? Oh, never mind. All those questions, put them all back down. Don't. So real quick, we're gonna do. Oh my gosh, dude, shut up, phone. My pants are vibrating. So, real quick, we are collectively Goblins and Growlers, and you're a Growler now. And you've been a Goblin your whole life, so it's perfect.
Your cloak is in the mail.
Right.
Yeah, Goblin with a thyroid problem.
Alex owns Alpha Comics and Games, Willow Lawn, Richmond, Virginia, all women-owned comic book store. It's the best. Buy local. Please check them out. They're way better than Amazon. Bezos does not need your $12 for that comic, but guess who does to pay rent? Alex. So go to Alpha Comics and Games. Check out Quid Pro Roll, our podcast. There's another podcast up here you really should check out, which is, I don't need to hand you this mic.
Which is called Whose Roll Is It Anyway?
Yes, thank you guys so much for being here.
Come up and get swag bags, and we'll be trying to figure out what to do about some pop-up games here in just a few minutes.
Yeah, if you want to play pop-up games with us, please go outside so we're not interrupting swag bag grabbage and other et ceteras.